Jess Clark here with Special Teams Youth Strength. I'm here with Luke Rhodes here in Westfield, Indiana at the train. Today we're going to talk a little bit about mobility for long snappers, so we're just going to go ahead and title this Long Snapper Yoga. Alright, so the biggest thing we need to talk about first is there is a difference between mobility and flexibility. So mobility is the ability to move freely, and it's an active movement, where flexibility is the quality of bending easily, and it's passive. So one thing that we need to look at is it really a mobility issue or a flexibility issue? So a flexibility issue would be shortened or tight tissue, such as the muscle, fascia, or even like the joint capsule that we're looking at. And it can also be degeneration of the passive tissue, such as the menisci or the bony structures of the body, like that joint capsule. So a good example of this is if Luke is laying flat on the floor, on his stomach, like roll over, and he was just to relax his leg, and I was to hold his hip down, and I was to raise his leg, just like that, that would be his flexibility, all right? Now from there, if he was to raise his leg on his own, as far as he can, just like that, that would be his mobility. And you can see the difference that his knee and his ankle compared to the two, all right? So once we've talked about that and you figured out whether it's a mobility issue or a flexibility issue, we're gonna talk about the positions found in long snapping. So if Luke's gonna set up before a snap, so if he's gonna go through his routine, he's just gonna pretend that he's gonna snap that ball. When he gets to the line, he does his little check down and whatnot. He gets set. What we're looking at here is we have some sort of spinal mobility, so not only lumbar, thoracic, and cervical, because he needs to move his head to look back at Rigo or wherever he's snapping to. We have ankle mobility. You can see that from his shin angle. We also have hip mobility. So then once he gets set, he fires his snap. And then when he finishes, his finishing position of the snap, still have ankle mobility, still have hip mobility, and you notice the change in his spine and his neck. So again, a lot of thoracic, lumbar, cervical mobility, hip mobility, and ankle mobility. When we do this session that we're going to go through, we want to do it either right after a session or on a separate rest day. Okay? Reason being is that it has been shown that static stretching alone right before a session can ruin your overall performance. So we're going to go ahead and go over what this is real quick, and then we will break it down. So for the warm-up, 5 to 10 minutes, easy aerobic work. If you don't have a bike, rower, skier, treadmill, any kind of bodyweight movement that just gets the heart rate going, so air squats, lunges, push-ups, anything like that will be huge. And then from there, we'll go ahead and foam roll. A lot of this is more mental than anything. There's actually been some studies that show that foam rolling isn't really beneficial. But again, if an athlete thinks it's good for them, and they like it, and it feels good, go ahead and do it. So we're going to do 10 passes, lower body, then we're going to work our way up to our upper body. And then we'll go through some hip mobility, spine mobility, shoulder mobility, wrist, and ankle. So again, when it comes to foam rolling, I like to start from the lower body and work our way up, 10 passes per muscle group. So Luke's going to start with his ankles and calves. You can either do 2 at the same time, or if you want to add a little bit of pressure just like that, you can. The reason we like to add a little bit of pressure or sometimes use a barbell is because the studies that actually talk about foam rolling and the benefits of foam rolling were done on mice and using human hands to rub the mice's extremities. So if you think about that, that's thousands of pounds of pressure to actually cause a cellular change versus if Luke's just using this foam roller, it's not really going to cause too much. It'll feel good, but it's not going to be a long-term solution. So even though foam rolling and stretching is great, sometimes we need to look at the root of the issue, which might be actual movement dysfunction. So once he does extend from his ankles, he's going to move to his hamstrings. Another thing to note is that you do not want to actually go over the joint. We want to keep everything in the muscle. I think it's important as an athlete to develop your own routine when it comes to warming up, something that allows you to get mentally ready, physically ready. Doing a team warm-up is great, but at the same time, if there's any extra things that you need to work on that you're limited in, take the extra time, get out on the field early to make sure that you can get that work done. So I know Luke does a great job of that when we train together. He has his written warm-up that I write for him, but then he'll also do a lot of his own things that he needs to work on. So today we'll go through a lot of exercises. I'll give you my variations of it, and then Luke will actually add some of his in there as well. So. All right, so the first thing we're going to start with is some hip mobility, then work our way into spinal mobility, shoulder, wrist, and ankles. Ideally, we like to do this in sort of like a flow session. So you'll notice that a lot of stuff starts on your back, then you'll roll into like a quadruped position, and then slowly work your way into like a standing or a kneeling position, all right? A lot of these things you can do on your own without any extra implements such as bands or weights, but we're gonna give you guys multiple ideas just so that if you do have kettlebells, you do have bands, you do have like crossover symmetry, that you can go ahead and do this. So we'll start with our hip mobility. The first thing we're gonna do is leg lowers. So Luke's gonna lay flat on his back. He's gonna start with his legs straight out, just like that. While he's doing this, he's gonna think about keeping his toes pointed back towards him. He's gonna lower one leg at a time, right?
Actively flexing the quad.
Right. As he does this, you can think about exhaling on the lower, bringing your belly button to the floor, get a little bit more core engagement. A lot of the posts that I talk about, we talk about proximal core control with distal limb mobility. So being able to breathe and brace properly will actually help with mobility, because sometimes, when you're all tight and wound up, it's neural tension. So we're looking to fix that neurological and neuromuscular tone. Yeah. And so if you can't do a straight leg like that, one thing we like to do is we'll actually post up against the rig or against a door jamb that'll allow you to get a little bit more of a stretch. So in this position, this would be ideal if you can keep that 90 degrees. If not, we're gonna look for like a 45-degree angle that'll allow you to keep your leg as straight as possible. And then from there, again, you're just going to do that leg load. 10 per side is usually pretty good, so you feel a nice stretch. From there, we'll just have Luke stay flat on his back on the floor. We'll scoot away so we're better lighting. We have hip rotations. So you can either do two variations of this. You can start with your knees all the way up at a 90 degree, and then from there just drop to one side. You feel a nice stretch in that low back. Do 5 to 10 per side. Again, breathing, slow and control, try and control the movement.
Try to keep both your shoulders on the ground.
Yep.
When you start to come up, not too far.
And if that's too hard, you can always just have both feet flat on the floor, and then we'll just rock back to the floor. Once you've done 5 to 10 of those, we'll roll to our stomach. First thing we have is rocking frog. So there's a two-legged version, and then there's a single-leg version. The two-legged version, just like this. Notice that Luke's ankles are flat and his feet are turned out. He's trying to create as much mobility in that ankle. Again, you can go high, you can go low. And again, you're just going to try and sit. One thing that Joe DeFranco, one of the strength coaches that works with a lot of NFL athletes, talks about is driving your knees into the floor and thinking about squeezing the floor together. That'll create a little bit more tension, which will help with a better stretch. So again, 8 to 10 of those.
As you can see, like how this would pertain to long snapping, this is almost your position at the pre-snap. Being able to move through your hips and your spine.
And then from there, we can go into an adductor rock back where you just have one leg going at a time. Again, still think about keeping that front foot pointed forward. Notice that his heel is turned out. Where he's feeling that is the inside part of his leg, not necessarily his hip. Right? The adductors.
Still feel a little bit on the ground with it.
Once we've done our rocking frog and adductor stretch, rock back, we'll go into a saddle stretch. This one's a little bit tougher. This one's going to get more quad based.
So depending how far you can get back, some people, I can't get as far back as some people, but it's also stretching my ankles. Some people can get down to their elbows, some people can go all the way to the ground. It's about as far as I can go.
This is also a good quad strengthening exercise. If we were to attach a band to a rig, have Luke lay as far as he can, holding onto the band, it would be stretching his quads, and he can just continue back and forth. And that's just working that quad strength in the farthest range of motion. After our saddle stretch, we're going to go to a corner with a reach. So Luke's going to set up in a push-up position. From there, he's going to bring one foot to the outside of his hand, and he's going to rotate towards the side that's up. So again, he has a nice straight back leg. He's getting a nice deep hip stretch on that leg that's coming towards his hand. And then notice when he rotates, he's going straight up instead of like trying to reach too far back, all right? Again, we're getting a little bit of T-spine mobility in there. Again, 8 to 10 per side. If you want to add a little elbow to instep to get a deeper stretch, you can. Just like that. So that'll take us into our spinal work. First thing we're gonna do is a cat-cow. So Luke's gonna start in a quadruped position, hands and knees. What we're gonna do is when we're in this cat position, he's gonna think about pushing his stomach to the floor, bringing his head up. Notice that nice arch in his back, that's what we're looking for. And then as he pushes through the floor and starts to extend, he's gonna think about pushing through his back, rounding as much as he can, just like that, all right?
This looks a lot like your finish on the snap.
Yep. So again, 8 to 10 of those. You can see how important cervical mobility is. If you have a lot of neck pain and issues, this is a great stretch to do to help break that up. Once you do 8 to 10, the next thing we're gonna do is a quadruped reach through. So you can either do this with a foam roller or without. The foam roller is just a little,
It's just a tool to help you.
help you slide a little bit better.
Go through it. So if you don't have a foam roller,
Just like that. Notice he's still trying to keep all the rotation in his lumbar spine, using a little bit of thoracic mobility.
you have a foam roller. It makes it a little easier to roll through it. Stay like smooth.
And notice that when he does have the foam roller, his start position's a little bit higher and a little bit more controlled than if he didn't have the foam roller. Again, 8 to 10 per side.
Yeah, foam roller, you're just kind of reaching.
Next thing we're going to do is a squat to reach. So again, the nice thing about squatting is that it's deep hip flexion, which again is the start position of your stack. So Luke's going to think about getting into the bottom of his squat. He can use his hands to hang onto the bottom of his toes to hold him in that position. But all he's going to do is rotate up again to that side. Nice thoracic mobility and lumbar mobility. But again, he's sitting deep into that squat, getting a little bit of ankle mobility as well as hip mobility. Those look good, 8 to 10 per side. And then last thing we're going to do is warrior one position with a twist. So this is one thing Luke likes to do at yoga class.
Trying to get your front leg as parallel to the ground as possible, so as low into your lunge as you can. And you just, if this is as far as you can get, good. If not, you can open up, get a little more twist.
You notice that one thing that we like to do when we do a lot of like split stance work and single leg where we're in a split stance or balance is try and widen that base a little bit. So you're not standing on a tightrope the whole entire time. You notice Luke's feet are kind of offset, which allows him to have a little bit more balance versus being completely in line. I'd say with this maybe like a 30-second hold as needed. And then from there we're going to go ahead and move into our shoulders. So child's pose. But we're gonna go reaching to the opposite side. So again, we're gonna work one side at a time. Not only are you getting some shoulder mobility in here, but you're also getting some rotational T-spine and lumbar mobility.
Open up your lats a little bit.
From there, we'll go back to laying on the floor. We'll do a 90-90 internal, external rotation. So you can either do this laying on the floor, or you can do this kind of like in a half kneeling position, which is kind of called like a Powell raise. But essentially all you're doing is working on pushing that arm down and extending. So you have your internal rotation there and a little bit of external rotation.
I'm actively pushing with this hand. This is about as far as I can go without it, so you get a little extra stretch by pushing.
And that goes back into the difference between mobility and flexibility. A lot of times people have the range of motion, the flexibility, but they don't have the mobility, which is the actual controlling of the muscle and being able to move through that range. So that would be your passive flexibility right there. And then if Luke's not pressing on it, that's his mobility right there. Once we finish that up, we'll go into what's called a reach and rotate. There's two ways to do this. If you're mobile enough, you don't need the foam roller, but I like the foam roller just because it takes a lot of the low back out of it. But essentially you're gonna start with your hands together, you're gonna push over your hands, and then that top hand's gonna come over like a clock, trying to keep your knee in contact with that foam roller. You're just gonna reach out just like that. If you wanna bring your hand under, you can. We'll bring it back.
Without the foam roller, you kind of lose a little control, and
Yeah,
just gives you something to push against there.
Yeah, your back starts to play part of that mobility, and you're not really focusing on the T-spine and shoulder that we're looking for. While Luke's down there, we're gonna go ahead and go over what a kettlebell armbar is. Let's go kettlebell armbar, and then we'll do pull over up. Yeah. So when you pick up a kettlebell, you don't just want to like rip it off the floor. You want to think about cradling it because this will keep your shoulders healthy. So notice Luke grabs with both hands. He starts in almost like a double bench press position, and then from there he presses up. Hand out to the side, knee slightly bent, and he's going to reach up and rotate. Notice that we're trying to keep his shoulders stacked. He's just relaxing, and he's going to try and get his chest as close to the ground as possible as he lets that arm go. He's going to feel this stretch all the way through his chest and his shoulder. 3 to 5 per side with about 3 deep breaths in that position.
You'll probably find that you're more mobile on one side or the other. That's normal. Based on how your shoulders, you know. My right shoulder's a little less flexible than my left. More mobile.
All right, the next thing we're gonna do is we'll go kettlebell pullover. So there's 2 ways to do this. We can do it off the floor or we can do it on a bench. I like using a bench because it'll actually show you the full range of motion that we're looking at, more so than having yourself on the floor. So all Luke's gonna do is he's gonna grab a kettlebell. It doesn't have to be super heavy, like 5 pounds does the trick, but that's a 12 kilos, 26 pounds. Just gonna lay on the bench. Again, similar to the leg lower, we're gonna think about keeping our low back nice and flat on the bench. And as he exhales, he's gonna lower that kettlebell, thinking about bringing his rib cage down. Just like that. If you wanna add a little bit of a hip flexor stretch, you can strengthen your legs out, or we can just keep them straight just like that. But you notice that his shoulders are in line with his head. And as he goes through like 2 or 3 more of these, his shoulders should go a little bit further and further, and you're gonna be able to see his ears as he goes. There you go. So that would be like his far end range of mobility. Anything further than that, and we start to lose the straightness in our elbows. But you can actually see as he's going through the first 2 reps compared to these last 2 and 3 that he's getting more and more mobile.
Breathing out on my descent, pushing my belly button
Yep.
into the bench.
Yeah, we're trying to take some of that thoracic mobility or thoracic assistance out of it as he goes. Once we do that, we have some crossover symmetry work that we're going to do, as well as some band distraction complex. So if you're fortunate enough to have the crossover symmetry system or bands, these are some great exercises we can do. So the first one you're going to do is you're just going to do a face pull to a 90-90 external rotation, and then an overhead press. As we press, again, we want to try and keep our ribs down, core braced. We're just going to reverse the process. About 8 reps of these is great. Another one you can do for overall shoulder health and lat health is almost like a straight arm lat pull down. So we're here, keeping our ribs tight, and we're pulling straight down, almost like a rowing. This gets that upper back, anterior delt, and lat. Again, you can go online and find the crossover symmetry protocol, or if you just YouTube the exercises, you'll be able to find it. The next thing we're going to do is a shoulder mobility complex. So all you need is a band. Luke's going to dog leash his hand through there, just like that. And then from there, he's going to grab on the band. He's going to turn his palm up. And then all he's going to do is step back as far as he can, get a nice little tension on that. And then he's just going to bend over, keeping the arm as straight as possible. You're going to feel a nice stretch in your shoulder and your lat. If you want to add to this, you can take this leg, come down like that, or you can even move it towards his left leg behind him, where he's almost twisted. And this will give this like nice little lat stretch right here. And you get a bit of a hip flexor stretch. About 15 to 30 seconds on that side. Switch. And without removing his hand, all he's going to do is think about hugging himself across body, just like that. This again also gets that lat. He can add to this by going over his head if he wants and bending. Get more of a lat and a hip flexor stretch as well. And last but not least, you can switch arms and then we'll go into a tricep stretch. You can do one arm or you can do two-handed just like this. Again, trying to keep the ribs down, core braced. So do the one arm variation. All we're trying to do is try and get this elbow as far back as we can where this core stays nice and tight. You can lunge into that if you want to get a hip flexor stretch as well.
You'll notice this in throughout your snapping movement. This position right here is, once you lift that ball off the ground, this is where you're creating that whip with your arms and your core.
More mobility, more whip.
More mobility, more whip. Switching arms.
That's pretty much shoulder mobility. The next thing we're going to do is talk about wrist mobility. So, before we go on to wrist mobility, we'll talk about shoulder mobility. Another one that you can do is shoulder cars. So it's controlled articulations. All Luke's going to do is start with his arm straight. He's going to start with his thumb forward, and then he's going to raise his hand as straight as possible. As he gets to the top, he's going to turn his palm out, almost like he's swimming, and then he's going to come back. Ideally, the goal is to keep that palm when this arm rotates, when he comes out to here, as close to his ear as possible as he comes back. If you're tight, and let's pretend Luke's tight, so he's going to come all the way to the top. Notice how his arm's way out to the side. Sometimes what will happen is as he rotates out like this, right, he'll get a little bit of hip rotation, or his arm will come out here versus being up to his ear. So go as far as you can, as comfortably as you can, do these daily, and you'll notice that your mobility might change drastically over the few weeks that you do this. From there, we'll talk a little bit about wrist mobility. So we can do some loaded wrist mobility. All you're going to do is start in that quadruped position, palms just like that. You're going to rock onto your wrists.
Try to keep your palms on the ground. I do this before every game and every practice, kind of just to warm up my wrists. I go all different ways. It's also stretching your elbows a little bit. Kind of turn them in. Go as far back as possible. You can feel this through your shoulders.
Nice little forearm stretch as well. And then after that, you just have some wrist circles, so you can go in a circular motion, or you can do figure eights. Forward, backwards, left to right, whatever you can do.
If you were close, you could hear my wrist just popping.
And then from there, we like to finish off with some ankle mobility. So the first one we do is a half kneeling ankle mob. All you're going to do is think about keeping your heel flat on the floor. You're just going to push that knee over your toe as far as you can. Luke already has pretty decent ankle mobility, so we don't really need to worry too much about that. So this is working on that dorsiflexion, which is bringing your toe up. And this is plantar flexion, pushing your toe down. If this is a challenge for you or you don't feel much of a stretch, you can always grab a weight or a plate and put it right on top of your leg and do the same thing as you rock. And then last but not least, we'll finish off with some ankle circles. Just grabbing onto something, putting your toe into the ground, and then just rolling like that. If you're prone to ankle injuries or you wear like active ankles and braces, doing some of these will definitely help out in the long run. Some like manual resistance ankle work to strengthen that tib anterior would be huge. That's just essentially sitting down and having someone hold your ankles or your toes down as you lift up and down. That's pretty much it when it comes to mobility. Hopefully you can take something away from that. Again, don't do these before any kind of strenuous activity. Do it after and then on a rest day, but make sure you get a little bit of a warm up in. I would say choose 2 to 3 of those exercises we went through and kind of do them in a circuit, 2 times through, 8 to 10 reps on any of the stuff that we talked about where there's multiple sides, or if you're holding any of the static stretches, 15 to 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think it's very important just based on what we just went through, your mobility and your flexibility, the combination of them. And then, it's not all just about being as strong as you can. You have to be able to move those muscles through a full range of motion to get your full potential of your snap speed and accuracy. And just what we've been doing the last 2 years has really helped me develop my mobility and flexibility while continuing to build muscle and stay strong. So the combination of all of them is how you can be as good as you possibly can.
All right, guys, stay tuned. We got plenty more videos of workouts, nutrition tips, anything that you guys want to know, we'll be putting it out. And then tune in to Special Teams U Instagram stories and my Instagram story on Coach_Jess Clark. We'll be putting out some, various questions, wanting to know what you guys want to know, and then Luke and I will definitely answer them in future series.